Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nella and here I talk all about motherhood, parenting, travels, budgeting, many things. And this channel is super new, so you'll see only a few videos, but there will be more to come. So if you're interested in this kind of topic, then please follow along. Today I want to share a very personal story of mine. It's the story of my second birth. And with my second, I needed a scheduled C-section. I was very at ease with that information, not at first, but after I processed it. Because on the good side, I had 1 week before I knew that I will need a surgery. And at the end of the day, it's a big decision because it's a major surgery. And if you have to make it voluntarily, it's just a lot of information to process. So I was very grateful that I was informed 1 week prior so I could do some research. I could understand what it actually means for me, for my baby, for my body, and then make informed decision. So therefore, I'm sharing my story today in case you are thinking about having a C-section, either elected or scheduled, or you might be scared that you might end up needing one, like an emergency one. Then I think this video will be the right one to watch. For me, everything started with the fact that my baby was breech. She wasn't growing very well and she also didn't turn. Therefore, I had two choices, either to be induced or have a C-section. With my case, having a breech baby, induction was a very risky move because it will be definitely painful. And therefore, I might end up needing an emergency C-section just because the baby is breech and she might get stuck. So my doctor recommended for me to choose a C-section, and I was actually very happy with my choice. When I agreed to have a surgery, then my doctor basically explained to me what the surgery will look like, what they will do, what are the risks, what are the procedures, and what should I be aware about. That was my time to ask the questions and if I had any concerns. And I was very lucky that my gynecologist was performing the C-section on me. So I knew her and I just felt at ease. And one question I did ask her in the very beginning, like 1 week before my scheduled C-section, was, is there something I could do to support my breastfeeding journey? Because with the first one, I had difficulties with him not latching well and like drinking formula from day one and stuff like that, which wasn't the problem. I mean, fed is best in my point of view, but still I wanted to have like a smoother start this time. And one recommendation my doctor actually supported was me extracting my colostrum. So basically 1 week before I had a baby, I already started massaging my breast just to get those tiny drops of colostrum into syringes and freeze it. And when I say tiny, I really mean it, because it would take me 20 minutes to collect 1 milliliter or even less of this colostrum. But at the end, I brought it all with me to the hospital and they were giving it directly to my baby right after birth, which was enough for her to wait for me until I was kind of out of the surgery and then I could breastfeed. I was just very excited that it have worked, and therefore I would recommend it to anyone who is willing to do that. But it's very important that you always advise to your gynecologist before doing that, because it might have some stimulating effect if you have like some risky pregnancy or something to be aware of, that it might start your contractions. At least that was one of the risks. But when I talked to my doctor, she said it's fine. So I did it and it all worked out. On the day of the C-section, I was just playing around with my toddler and waiting for my mom to arrive. Because the thing was that we had the choice of the date. And the initial proposal my doctor gave to us was actually the birthday of my son, because my son was born like end of July and my due date was also around this time. So then when the doctor announced the date, I was like, well, we could do that, but there are two things. First, it's the birthday of my son, which would be funny to have kids be born on the same day. And another thing was that I have arranged my mom to fly in and support us with the family and that was the day after. So basically, eventually we opted in to have our kids' birthdays one day apart. So we arrived to the hospital, and then it was a very smooth sailing. I mean, honestly, when I came with contractions, it was just everything was new. Like, I didn't know where to go, I didn't know what to expect. And then this time around, I was just ready. Like, I had made my peace of mind with the fact that I will need a surgery, but at the same time, I was in a way happy that I don't need to go through all the painful contractions. So after we arrived, we were just chilling there. I dressed into this hospital gown. My doctor came in to say hi. They did take some blood samples, and they also dripped a lot of fluids into me. And I mean, it was a little bit uncomfortable because the fluids were cold. But when I think about the contractions part, that's literally nothing. So eventually, after spending a few hours there, the nurses came and they wheeled me into the surgery. That's where they transferred me on the surgery table, and then the anesthesiologist came. And the thing is that when you need a scheduled C-section, they don't do an epidural. They do an anesthesia called a spinal block. And it works differently because it doesn't really go into the epidural space, but rather it goes directly into your spinal cord. And therefore it also feels like more secure, and it works immediately. Once I received my spinal block, it felt like a very small injection, and then all of a sudden the whole like lower part of the body became like really, really warm, but in a good way, you know. And then they checked the belly and like the sensations, if I could move my legs, if I could feel the pressure. And the idea is that once you have a C-section, you can and you should feel the pressure, but you shouldn't feel any pain. And that was the case for me. So they started the procedure, they prepped me, they cleaned the area, and then they covered the surgical area as well. And I couldn't see what was happening, but I really wanted to know and to observe how my child is being born. I'm not that kind of person who is scared of blood or anything, and I have finished medical degree, so for me it wasn't new or different for like to be and observe the C-section. So I really wanted to see. So I asked my doctor, and she arranged as well with the rest of the nurses that they could film the moment when my baby was born. So I have that video. My husband could also be in the room with me, and he would like narrate everything that was happening there because he could also observe. And then he would just tell me, oh yeah, now they are doing the incision, now they are taking the baby out, now like they are doing this and that. So that was that was nice and in a way reassuring. And after the baby was born, it was like very, very fast. Like after they started the surgery, the baby was already out there within like 7 to 10 minutes. So it felt like, okay, this has been an option as well. Then the baby was out and my husband could cut the umbilical cord, and then they would also clean her up a little bit and bring her directly to me. Honestly, I didn't expect this part to happen. I don't know, I somehow imagined that it might be difficult for me to hold her, but it was working perfectly, and I was very happy that she was just there, and it was just so effortless. Like I was just laying there holding my baby being born. I just felt happy in that moment. And after a while they also took the baby so I could get like the final preparation, but my husband was with the baby all this time, so he could do this skin on skin contact and keep her close to his chest. And then I guess the spinal block and the anesthesia and all the drugs started to work a little bit more, or like, let's call it fading away effect, because I started feeling very drowsy and sleepy and like a little bit shivering. But I read that it's very normal to feel like this when you do have a surgery or a C-section. And therefore I wasn't scared. It was just like this very interesting feeling, like something unusual in that sense. They transferred me from the surgical table onto the bed. At first, I really thought I can do it myself, but they were like, no, don't you even try. Because really, you are paralyzed from the waist down, and they really have to lift you to transfer you onto the bed. And then they brought us back to the labor ward, and that's where I could be with the baby. I could try to breastfeed. And they also brought us food in there so I could try to eat. Honestly, I was very hungry because I didn't eat anything from morning. Like, they didn't recommend it. I could only sip some water. But then as soon as I ate my portion, I started feeling very dizzy and nauseous. And yeah, the food didn't really sit very well. But I also read that this is a very common side effect after the drugs. And then it was basically the afternoon, and they escorted me to the ward. We stayed the night. I could breastfeed her, but the thing was that I couldn't actually lift myself because of the incision, and like in general, I had a very low blood pressure at that point. So I felt very drowsy and dizzy. Throughout the night, I would always call the nurses to pick her up and change her and bring her to me so I could breastfeed. And also, I forgot to mention the very beginning that I had a catheter inserted into my bladder. So I didn't need to stand up to go to the bathroom, but rather they would empty the bag, and then they would also observe how many liquids I do have like after the surgery. So they would also bring food and water and like heat pads for my breasts. I could also just like try to latch, or like if it didn't really work, I would also ask for a pump. So it all worked out really good. And I mean, of course, those few days, they are not simple. They are very intense. And now when we remember, it always feels like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that heavy. But in reality, it is intense. It is a lot of sensations, including the hormonal shift, including all the emotions, the fact that you have a baby, especially if it's your firstborn. But even with the second, it was still very intense in that sense. But I knew that I know what I'm doing, and I just trusted myself a little bit more, which was really, really helpful. And so after the C-section, I was feeling very drowsy for 2 days. So I couldn't really walk, and my blood pressure kept being low. After the second night, it did improve naturally, and I could finally stand up and walk slowly. And once I passed this threshold, then everything just became better and better. And after 3 days, I was discharged, and my baby was as well. They did recommend that we check as soon as possible for hip dysplasia, as the baby was breech. And unfortunately, my baby girl was diagnosed with very severe hip dysplasia, grade 4, which is like the most severe form. So I'll make sure to make a separate video about that, because there is a lot to cover on how we went through treatment and what we learned and what I wish I knew beforehand. So if you're interested in topics like that, then make sure to subscribe. And some additional things to know about Switzerland and giving birth is that after you give a regular birth, then it's allowed to be in the hospital for 2 nights. After C-section, it's possible to stay for 3 nights, unless there are any complications, of course, and you need to stay a bit longer. And in my case, I did stay 2 nights, and I was lucky that nobody was in the same room with me. So we didn't need to upgrade, but I did have a double room all to myself. And then in the evening of the second night, in the afternoon actually, they did announce that I will have a neighbor who will come tonight. So I decided that maybe it's time for us to go home and just be in comfort of our own home, which was also completely fine. And they just simply prepared all the papers, and as my baby was healthy and didn't have any complications, and I was also stable and able to move, and also like I was able to go to the bathroom by myself, so they didn't see any reasons why I cannot go home, and they just let me go. And after that, I had the Hebammes visiting me regularly. So in Switzerland, after the first birth, the insurance covers up to 16 visits. And after the second birth, I think it's reduced to 8, but there is always a possibility to prolong if you need some additional support and help from your hebamme. Then you can also request your gynecologist to give you a prescription for additional visits. And so my hebamme would come to my home and observe myself and the baby. She would check the bandage of the incision, and by the recommendation of the hospital, I didn't need to do anything with the bandage. I could shower with it. It was very secure, and I could keep it for around a week, I think, and then I could change it. Or they said I can simply remove it and allow it to dry. But overall, the incision healed very, very good. And around 4 weeks or so postpartum, after like the initial healing, the initial scar has closed, I started applying the silicone bandages, which are specifically designed to support the healing of the C-section scar. And at the moment, my scar is barely visible, and I'm like 9 months postpartum. And I would also massage my scar to like separate the tissues a little bit, because I learned that it can be beneficial and avoid this kind of step or the wrinkles around the scar. So I did this, and I find that it can be really helpful. And so this is the story of my second birth and C-section. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the future ones. Bye bye.